Bro, I don't really know which one to get. I don't know. Should I get the iPad Air or the iPad Pro? I mean, I feel like buying the iPad Pro. Oh, hey there. I'm trying to decide whether to get the brand new shiny iPad Air or the iPad Pro that Apple released earlier this year. Well, the line start behind me. In this video, I'm going to try and break down everything we know about the iPad Pro and everything we know about the iPad Air and how they compare to each other. And we're also going to talk about every compromises that Apple made on the iPad Air for them to reduce the price lower than that of the iPad Pro. So that sounds like something you're interested in. Let's go. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and on this channel I do tech unboxing, tech reviews, and tech comparison just like this. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, smash the subscribe button or press the subscribe button if that's what you're into. Turn on the notification bell and drop me a like button because it's going to help my channel a lot. You to be able to share my content with other people. Anyways, I talk too much. Let's get to the comparison. So let's start with the design comparison. The iPad Air only comes in one size, 10.9 inches, while the iPad Pro comes in two sizes, 11 inches and 12.9 inch. So if you're someone that wants a very big iPad, the iPad Pro is the only one that offers that option because the 12.9 inch iPad Pro is actually very big. So in this video, I'm going to try and focus on the 11 inch iPad Pro and the 10.9 inch iPad Air since they're very close to each other. The design of the iPad Pro and the iPad Air are actually very similar to one another. The only slight difference is that on the iPad Air, there seems to be a thicker bezel around the display. But apart from that, the design is pretty much similar. Now, let's talk about the display on both devices. Both devices come with an LCD display that Apple love to call liquid retina display. Apple and their fancy name, but it's an LCD display anyways. The 11-inch iPad Pro is obviously slightly bigger than the 10.9-inch iPad Air. That's a 0.1-inch difference between the iPad Pro and the iPad Air, since 11 inches minus 10.9 is 0.1. You won't be able to tell the difference between the display on the iPad Pro and the iPad Air since they both have similar pixel density. Anyways, the iPad Pro comes with a screen resolution of 2388 by 1688 and a brightness of 600 nits, while the iPad Air comes with a screen resolution of 2360 by 1640 and has a brightness of 500 nits, which means that the iPad Pro is 20% brighter than the iPad Air. The iPad Pro also has 120Hz refresh rate, while the iPad Air only has 60Hz refresh rate. So when it comes to display, it seems that the iPad Pro has an upper end than the iPad Air, but not for everybody. If you're an artist or someone who likes to draw on the iPad, yeah, the 120Hz is going to be a better option. But if you're someone that doesn't really draw on the iPad, I don't think you'll be able to tell the difference. I mean, the 120Hz is going to feel smoother when you swipe in left and right. But the thing about refresh rate is that after a while, you won't be able to tell the difference. But like I said, if you're someone that draws on the iPad Pro or use the Apple Pencil a lot, the 120Hz is going to benefit you a lot and it's going to make a lot of difference. And for those of you guys that don't really understand what refresh rate means, is the amount of time your display refreshes the image on the display every second. If you have a device with a higher refresh rate, it's going to matter a lot when it comes to stuff like drawing because everything is going to feel smoother. Gaming, there's going to be less lag. Since the images are refreshing at a very fast rate, there's going to be less lag if you have a higher refresh rate. But not everyone needs 120Hz refresh rate because if you buy the iPad Pro just to consume content like Netflix, Hulu, or YouTube, I don't think you need 120Hz refresh rate. There are hardly videos on YouTube or Netflix that is 120 frames per second, so you're not going to need 120Hz when it comes to video consumption. So my point is that if you're trying to make a decision based on the display between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, it depends on what you do with the display. Like I said, if you're an artist that loves to draw, play games, 120Hz refresh rate is going to be the best option for you, and you can only get that on the iPad Pro. But if you're someone that just watch content or edit videos and stuff like that, you don't really need 120Hz. I mean, it's going to be good if you have it, but it's not something that you need like very much. And one other difference between the iPad Pro and the iPad Air is that on the iPad Pro you get FaceID, while on the iPad Air you get TouchID. In my own opinion, I feel like FaceID is the best option on an iPad because it's more convenient, but it all comes down to personal preference. That's just my opinion. One other difference between the iPad Pro and the iPad Air is that on the iPad Pro you get 4 speaker output, while on the iPad Air you only get 2 speaker output, which means that the iPad Pro is going to sound better and more immersive than the iPad Air. But at the same time, if you're like me, I don't really use the speaker on any of my device. I'm either using my AirPods or my headset, so this is not really a big deal for me. Now let's quickly jump to one similarities between the iPad Pro and the iPad Air, and that's the fact that both devices have USB-C, and this is actually good, which means that both the iPad Air and the iPad Pro has support for external monitors through USB-C cable, and you'll be able to connect your iPad Pro or your iPad Air to external devices like your SSD or speakers and stuff like that, this is actually very good. Now let's talk about the processing power of both devices. The iPad Air is powered by the brand new A14 Bionic chip, the same chip that is expected to be on the iPhone 12 series that is coming in October. While the iPad Pro is powered by the A12Z chip, and this is where I was actually very excited. In fact, I already made up my mind that okay, I'm getting the iPad Air since it has the latest A14 Bionic chip, and the iPad Pro has, well, the A12Z Bionic chip, which is not really an old chip. But at the same time, this hasn't been 100% confirmed. Based on calculation, the A12Z is slightly more powerful than the A14 Bionic chip. When it comes to processing power and graphic performance, this hasn't been 100% confirmed. All this is just based on calculation. But if you ask me if I believe it, I'm going to say yes. Because the A14 Bionic chip was meant to be only on the iPhone 12. Why did Apple put it on the iPad? I'm not saying that the A14 Bionic chip can work well on the iPad, but the A14 Bionic chip was made for the iPhone 12. And the A12Z chip was made specifically for iPad, not iPhones. So I'm expecting the A12Z that was made specifically for iPad to perform better than the A14 chip that was meant to be on iPhone but was put into an iPad. So I kind of agree with all this calculation, but at the same time, it hasn't been 100% confirmed. And even if it's true, it's just a slight difference. You might not even be able to tell the difference in the real world because sometimes, or most of the times, specs don't really translate into the real world. Let's talk about the camera difference between the iPad Pro and the iPad Air. The iPad Pro comes with a twin lens camera system with a LiDAR sensor, while the iPad Air comes with a single lens camera system with no LiDAR sensor. Which means that on the iPad Air, you're going to be missing out on the AR features that the iPad Pro has to offer through the LiDAR sensor. But if you don't really care about AR feature, and who doesn't care about AR? I mean, it's AR. Both cameras are going to be able to take amazing pictures and amazing videos, but you're going to be missing out on the wide angle that the iPad Pro has to offer. But if you don't really care about wide angle, or if you're like me and you don't really even care about the camera on an iPad, the iPad Air is a better option. Now let's talk about accessories. Both the iPad Pro and the iPad Air has full support for the Magic Keyboard, the Apple Pencil 2nd generation, and other accessories. So when it comes to full support for accessories, the iPad Air and the iPad Pro are actually very similar when it comes to that category. Now let's talk about the storage option you get on both devices, which will then link us to the price, and we're able to find out which one is actually worth the price based on what they have to offer. On the iPad Air, you get a storage option of 64GB, which is the base storage, and 256GB. While on the iPad Pro, you get an option of 128GB, which is the base storage, 256GB, 512GB, and up to 1TB of storage. As you can see, the iPad Pro has more storage option than the iPad Air, and also the base storage on the iPad Pro is 128GB compared to the 64GB on the iPad Air. Now for the base storage of the iPad Air, that's going to cost you $599. While the base storage of the iPad Pro 11 inches 128GB is going to cost you $799. That's a $200 difference. So are the differences between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro actually worth $200? Well, on the iPad Air you get a base version of 64GB, while on the iPad Pro you get a base storage of 128GB. On the iPad Air you get a display with a refresh rate of 60Hz, while on the iPad Pro you get a display with a refresh rate of 120Hz. On the iPad Air you get 2 speaker output, while on the iPad Pro you get 4 speaker output. On the iPad Air you get a single lens camera system. On the iPad Pro you get a twin lens camera system with a LiDAR sensor. I mean, that sounds like the iPad Pro has more to offer than the iPad Air. But is it worth $200? Well, if you ask me, yes, it's worth the $200 difference. Both devices are amazing, both devices are great. But if you ask me, I'm going for the iPad Air. Anyways guys, that's it for the comparison between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you find this video informative. And I really hope I help some of you guys to decide whether to get the iPad Air or the iPad Pro. If you do, drop me a like button. Like I said, it's going to help my channel a lot. And if you want to see more content from me, you might want to consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, turn on the notification bell, and I really also appreciate that too. Anyways guys, I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.